Hello, and welcome to What's the Deal? I'm Connie, your trusty guide through this labyrinth of renewable energy, because let's face it, sometimes it feels like we need a decoder ring to figure this stuff out. Well, today's guest knows both sides of the energy coin. Vincent Dewulf started out on what some might call the dark side, fossil fuels, but has since become a champion for renewable energy since 2015. He's here to answer some burning questions about the basics of renewables, why they matter, and how we can make sense of it all. So buckle up as we explore this crossover episode with somebody who's walked the path and lived to tell the tale. Let's jump in. Vincent Dewulf has a storied career in energy. After years in fossil fuel industry, he made the bold shift into renewables and now plays a key role in energy innovation. His unique perspective gives him an insider view of both systems, the pros, the cons, the room for improvement. So Vincent, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Connie. A very good morning.
Good. Thank you so much for being my first guest. I'm really excited to have you here. And look, you've worked on both sides of the energy equation. First, the fossil fuels, and now in renewables. So what inspired that switch, and how has your experience in the fossil fuels side shaped your perspective on energy transition?
Okay, thank you. So the inspiration is simply when you realize that renewable energy is not only technically possible, but economically cheaper than fossil fuel. There is no way back. You get a purpose from creating a better world. And after 25 years in the fossil fuel, I thought it's time now to contribute more positively to address a major issue, which is global warming. Shall we start with comparing fossil fuel and renewable from a pro and cons perspective?
Yeah, that would be great.
So on the fossil, let's start with fossil. The pros of fossil is actually one of the biggest one, which is driving it today, is the very high margins, not only for the producing countries, but also the consuming countries that are using it to make tax and get income. Obviously, fossil is also associated to baseload power, meaning it can be provided continuously, which is not the case of renewable energy. The cons on the other side of fossil, there's a few. First is about geopolitics. The creation of a huge and concentration of wealth in producing countries is not always associated with democracy and distribution of wealth across the population. No need to mention a few names like Russia or Iran, the most known these days.
Yeah.
Also, another consequence is that in fossil fuel, there are not many jobs per energy unit compared to renewable energy, and obviously the big cons is the CO2 emissions. Now, going to renewable, what are the pro on the renewable side is a lot of local and regional employment compared to oil and gas. Energy independence. Obviously, the price are now starting to beat fossil fuel in more and more places. So that's going to help the transition. And then the energy reservoir is unlimited. And obviously, it addressed the global warming issue. Now, there's a few cons, I must say, is their lower margin, again, compared to fossil fuel. And then the much higher capex, meaning the initial investment is much bigger than oil and gas. Now, the positive is that there's no fuel anymore, but the oil and gas, they invest little, but then they have to pay along the line by consuming the fossil. Another concept of renewable energy is intermittency, and we'll talk more in detail later.
Yeah.
There is also less room for government for tax because there is less margin in this business. So that's high level.
Yeah, and that's where it gets a bit political, isn't it, I guess?
Of course.
Less taxes. But, people often refer to, fossil fuels, oil and gas as the dark side. But there's no denying that it's been critical for global development. So what lessons or innovations from your fossil fuel days are helping you to prove successful in the renewable world?
Yeah, when I started my career with a major oil and gas company in the late 80s, I must admit that climate change was not a hot topic at all. Like, who was talking about that? Maybe scientists, but not just the average.
Very
So,
different times.
sure, the world wealth has increased a lot, especially in the industrialized countries.
Mm.
The good news is that I learned all my lessons about running the business in the oil and gas, which is actually very much transferable to the renewable energy sector. And today, when I meet renewable energy people in my own company and outside, guess what? They all, most of them have oil and gas background.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Because obviously I find that obviously being in recruitment, when I'm recruiting for anything within renewable energy, that seems to be the place to look. So yeah, do you think that was just where the first exposure was, or where do you think that comes from?
But that's simply because on both sides, energy is kilowatt hours, and that's a common product. Is it renewable or fossil? It's only a different way to get to those kilowatt hours or those, which is an energy unit. But the way to build projects is similar. Of course, some are different, like investment. In the renewable, you invest more capex in your machine, while in the fossil, you invest much more in paying the fossil rather than in the power plant. But there are a lot of commonalities. Managing project is exactly the same way.
Yeah, I can see that. So let's take it back to basics then. So a lot of people hear renewable energy and just think of, solar panels and wind turbines, things that we can see. But how would you describe renewables in a way that makes it accessible for even somebody who's completely new to the topic?
Renewable energy simply means energy sources that don't run out, which are sun, wind, plants, and water. And also, renewable technologies don't emit CO2 when producing energy. That's the simple definition, in my view.
Okay. And alongside that, there's a term that obviously gets tossed around a lot, energy transition. What does that actually mean? And yeah, where are we on that journey?
Yeah, that's also in the news every day almost.
Yeah.
The energy transition refers to the time needed to build a full renewable energy system, which requires trillions of investment and a few decades to replace fossil fuel by sustainable solutions. Stopping fossil in one day would simply freeze the global economy. So the transition is taking place at different level in the energy supply chain, and it's maybe worth elaborating a bit on this. On the supply side, so making this energy available, you need to talk about energy generation. So that requires new plants to be built that don't exist yet. The energy transportation, that is the long distance transportation about countries, because if you produce, as an example, in Germany, they have access to the sea only in the north. That means the south cannot have access. So they are investing billions of money to put cables to provide transportation cables to bring energy, renewable energy from the north to the south. The energy transition needs also to be developed, not only maintained, but also developed, because many people have an electric vehicle that is more energy. So we are moving slowly but surely to to more electricity in our transportation, and those cables are not ready. The cables today to take all that energy, so that has to change. And then the demand, as I said, there's more and more electrification into transport. There is also hydrogen used as a fuel to be used in the transport. And then last but not least, and it starts to be seen in the news, is that data center related artificial intelligence or Bitcoin is another example. They use a lot of energy as well. So globally, there is not only a shift of fossil fuel to renewable, but there is also the demand, which is people are sometimes scary. They talk about doubling the energy, electrical energy in the coming years.
Yeah.
That is simply, as some people say, impossible, but the demand seems to be there.
Yeah. And it's just how we're going to get there, isn't it? I mean, people I speak to every day, they're working so hard to change this, but it's actually getting it there and making it useful. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it unfolds. And also an event I was at a little while ago, they was talking about how, you know, it will change to EV cars, and could that be with having EV cars on the road and everyone driving them, that's then battery storage, all of the energy storage that we have that's covering the roads. So it really blew my mind as what we could be looking at into a short distance into the future, but things to dig into other episodes for sure. So let's tackle some common confusion then. So you mentioned at the start about baseload power, which is what fossil fuels provide. And then we have intermittent power, which is what, you know, things like wind and solar provide. So how do renewables bridge that gap?
Connie, this is actually, to me, probably the most important subject in the renewable world. Baseload power means that generation of energy can be provided 24/7. Obviously, sun, water, and wind are intermittent by nature, meaning they cannot provide this base load. So the energy storage will be able to bridge that gap, but today storage is still very small. The good news is that there are many technologies being evaluated right now in storage, but in short, once storage will be sorted out in terms of technology and being affordable, it's gonna unlock the renewable energy massively, and from that point onwards, then fossil will vanish from the planet quite quickly. But the storage is still. When I was at uni, one of the lesson number one in electricity was that electricity you cannot store. That's the first lesson you hear. Okay.
Really?
But today, luckily, we have been storing it in bigger and bigger scale. It's still expensive, but I think we are going to go there, and people realize that those technology will unlock renewable energy even further.
Yeah, I actually see it. I'm seeing so many innovations at the moment on this topic, and actually some future guests are about battery storage systems. So exciting for those where we can really dig into it. But I even see something the other week, which was the first sand storage battery. And it's someone in the Nordics has made it. I can't remember who, but I thought that was super cool that you can have.
I'm aware of an innovation which is now being developed, whereby, especially in our countries, so in Northern Europe, where you need to heat a lot of houses, they are building half container size that you put either in your garden or under the house.
Yeah.
And during the summer, with some technology on the roof, you bring the temperature of the sand to 700 degrees, well isolated. And during the winter, you use that heat from storing the sand to heat your house. That means no fuel anymore needed to heat the house, which would be a huge breakthrough. But
Yeah,
they
that's
are developing the technology in the Netherlands, by the way.
really, I'm going to talk to you about that after, because I'd love to learn more about that. And that's really, really cool. But that's what I'm saying. There's so much stuff out there. And, you know, one reason why I love it, because I'm learning every day and things I never thought would be possible. So yeah. And how about hydrogen then? So I hear a lot about hydrogen in the market, and it's making waves as a potential energy source. But is it, the silver bullet that everyone hopes it is, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it's far more complicated. And as I said earlier, I think the silver bullet is the storage. But
Yeah.
hydrogen is one of the storage. So let's explain. Hydrogen is not a source of energy by itself
Okay.
because it doesn't exist like this. You need to make it. And to make it, you need to do electrolysis, which requires electricity. And electrolysis, basically using water, including seawater, you split hot oxygen and hydrogen. So, and that costs electricity, meaning that costs money. But hydrogen can be used as a storage mean, obviously. And today they are looking at applications, starting with big, big transport means, meaning ship, train. There already it makes a lot of sense because storing hydrogen takes a lot of space. It's not there yet in the car because car is probably too small. So the future of hydrogen will be mostly for heavy transport, like I said, train and big vessels.
Yeah.
Some are thinking about planes as well, but again, innovation is improving every day. The efficiency of electrolysis seems to improve also.
Yeah.
Because people come not every day, but every quarter there is a new invention. Uh, but again, hydrogen is not a source of energy. It's a mean to transport energy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was seeing it again at that decarbonising transport event. It was they were saying hydrogen for the smaller planes, so like the private jets and things like that. But obviously, it's very explosive, isn't it? So it's the safety measures and things that would come alongside that.
If I may say, this explosive thing is the past. I
Oh,
mean,
really?
it's completely addressed. Hydrogen is not risky as we were learned at school because
Oh,
they were enjoying making some small explosions in labs, and that's what people remember. But hydrogen is fully under control. Can you imagine? We have now methane ships full of methane.
mm,
Nobody is afraid of those ships. The same will be true for hydrogen. So
yeah.
that is full, I would say, under control.
Okay, good. Debunked. Done.
Yeah, done.
Okay. Transitioning from fossil fuels isn't just as simple as flipping a switch. And as you said, it would be the end as right then and there. So what do you see as the biggest barriers to scaling renewables today? And, what are the main things you think? It's cost, infrastructure, mindset of people?
That's a good one, Connie. And I will start with the mindset because I think that's where it should start. And why is that? A few examples. The first issue is that the distance between your heart and your wallet is very small. And I'll give you examples, and it's in the paper. You might have seen that energy companies, big energy companies, no need to mention name because they all have been there. One day they say, okay, let's go to renewable, a bit greenwashing. And then before investing, they withdraw from renewables. So that they switch from heart, good intentions, but the wallet, as I said, there's still big margin in oil and gas, and they want to benefit from those margins until a certain time. And I'm pretty sure now that it's not for forever, but for now, that's what they do. Then the greenwashing example is how many yearly report of those big companies on the front page, you see a very nice wind farm. And usually this wind farm business is not even a percent of their business. So it's not always sane what people do. That is called greenwashing. And then another issue about mindset is the education. And then we should probably look at schools, etc., where people should understand If I take my car or a plane or a train or heating my house, what consumes more or less energy? Now the LED lamp, they basically don't consume anything compared to the thermal lamp of the past. And people will say, "Oh, I have an electric car, but I take a plane for the weekend to Lanzarote or whatever." There's a huge difference in energy consumption. So some education there would be welcome, so that people can, if they want to make a change, they can start with the low-hanging fruits, if I can say. Then the second subject is, or example is tax incentives. I would say they are not always used for the right purpose. I believe that tax on CO2 would be much more efficient than doing incentives on electrical vehicles. Why is that? You probably know people. I know people who have an electrical vehicle because the state gives them an incentive, but they never fill the batteries. They only drive on fossil, and their car is then 300 tons, 300 kilo of batteries that they carry all the time. So they consume more than
Fuel.
it
Yeah.
was 100% electric car. So these hybrid and incentives, by the way, Switzerland stopped this incentive because they realized, globally we emit more CO2. So education needs also to take place at government level and not only at the user side. Now, the infrastructure of transporting electricity is very old. We need to reinforce and bring more electrification in our lives. That takes also time and money. Now, the cost of global warming disaster is not yet high enough, clearly, for government to increase the CO2 tax. But at some point, I think it will come, because you hear more and more of those disasters being very heavy in money terms, and also people, lives being lost. And the most important will be the cost of both energy generation, energy storage, we mentioned already, which both are improving every day, so that barrier should disappear slowly but surely. The last point, I think, and that is an odd one and difficult to remove, but it's there. After the Second World War, the Allied countries, or I think many countries, agreed not to tax kerosene for planes and heavy fuel for vessels in order to boost the economy. But then this no tax, so if you take a plane wherever or a ship, there's no tax. That means that in the winter, we get apples from New Zealand that are even cheaper than our own apples in the summer here. It's a nonsense, but difficult now to go back to the country and say, hey guys, let's start taxing kerosene and the heavy fuel used for those containers, vessels, and also any vessel. So in those days, it definitely helped boost the economy. But today, it creates a nonsense that it's cheaper to buy from the other side of the planet things that can grow in our own countries.
That's really crazy. I had no idea about that. I'm gonna definitely have a look into that. But yeah, they should have put like a time limit on that, because yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It worked at the time.
Difficult to address, but the world is suffering. For the global warming is and this nonsense is still in place, and I don't see a country starting to tax, because then they will be not they will lose compared to other countries who don't have it. So it's not
In a vicious circle.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the only answer will again is to address this will be to reduce the renewable energy cost and storage to bring down. That ultimately will beat those fossil fuel. So it's a competition, and I think long term we have a good chance to succeed, but it takes time. It takes time and critical mass to bring the cost down.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, there's often pushback that renewables just can't meet demand, reliability, or affordability. So I guess from your perspective, is there valid criticism, or are we closer than people think to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, in short, we are closer than people think. Depends who, obviously, depend on which side you are, on the wallet or on the hard side. But globally, you can see that the renewable energy investment are growing year by year, and that is the proof that it's progressing. Otherwise, people wouldn't put money there. Now, to address the pushback, we need to go in more detail. On the generation side, so hydro, solar, and wind have already lower cost than fossil fuel. Offshore wind cost is still on the high side, but has good reason to go down after a while, because offshore wind is actually one of the biggest green energy reservoir, but the price there is still high and it has to go down, and it will go down because every quarter you see what we call the levelized cost of energy going down. Now, on the transportation and distribution, as I said already earlier, the industrialized countries have infrastructure that is at least 50 years old, if not much more in some case. So those cables need to be replaced and maintained. But on top of that, as we are going to more electrification, the capacity of those cables also need to increase. So that costs a lot of energy. The example of Germany bringing green energy from the North Sea, the north to the south.
Yeah.
You need to put new cables, and that takes also time and a lot of money. And then obviously the storage, what I call the holy grail, is also important and will be more important in the future. And that everybody is watching this because that will, as I said, unlock renewable energy.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, as storage is not there yet, we have an additional price to pay in renewable energy, which is when wind is not blowing, then they need to start a gas turbine to make the energy when the wind is not there. And that's an additional cost. So that's why some countries, in France, for example, they said it's crazy. Since we have renewable energy, we emit more CO2 because they had to install backup solutions for the days when wind was not blowing. But in the long term, as I said, when storage and the grid will be more connected across Europe, then you will not need those backup solutions.
Yeah. I'm excited for what's to come. I really am. If people, are listening to this podcast and they want to reduce their carbon footprint, what's one renewable energy related change that you would recommend them to start with?
I have a few. There's not only one. There's a few things we can do.
Yeah, listen. We're open to listen.
But the one that emits most per individual and per person is probably traveling by air. As an example, that's a few years ago between Paris and London. There was somebody who made the maths. If you compare a flight versus the Eurostar, actually one flight is equivalent to 13 times the Eurostar.
Wow.
So the train would be much better. But today, as you might know, there are still planes flying between Paris and London.
Yeah.
You'd say, why? When you know this. The other one, and that's not only about energy, it's also about health. I mean, drive less and walk or bike more. I shouldn't say that to somebody living in Amsterdam because everybody bikes there.
That's my life.
Yeah, but walking 5 to 8 kilometers per day or the typical 10,000 steps is highly recommended if you want to stay healthy. And this will avoid a lot of polluted air made of not only CO2, which is what we always talk about, but there is far more than CO2. There is also benzene, carbon monoxide, NOx, SOx, many particles that we all breathe. We don't talk much about this, although today on my smartphone I can see the quality of air, luckily. So people realize, oh, today I shouldn't walk in the city because no wind, everybody's in the car, and everybody's emitting those. So we need to
Us.
think further than the CO2. It's also those particles which get into our body, not
Mm.
healthy at all. And then, strangely enough, the people, some people like driving fast to the office so that they can also drive fast to the gym in the evening. Why don't they go just by bike or walk? That's also sometimes strange.
Less
Another,
time if they was to walk or bike.
yeah, because with 8 kilometers in the city, you can reach a lot of places
Yeah.
and probably faster than going by car.
Mm.
Uh, I did three other points. The meat, especially beef, which is associated to a lot of CO2 and methane emissions.
Yeah.
I said earlier, switching to 100% electric cars. I'm
Mhm.
not in favor of hybrid for the reason I said, depending on the use of your car, because you have a lot of weight that many people don't, of batteries that they don't use it. And they
Mm.
can. And the last one is just at home, your thermostat, bring it down by 1 or 2 degrees. It can save 10, 20% of your energy consumption.
Yeah.
And put one pullover and or two eventually if you go really low. Um,
Yeah. No, they're really good tips. Really good tips. And yeah, with the avoid air travel one, I try to where I can. I actually, because there's a train from Amsterdam to London. So when I go and see my family, I really do try and get the Eurostar. Obviously, there's only a few trains a day, so it's whether it's available. But it's also a much nicer experience, I feel. It's definitely not as stressful as going through an airport or,
yeah.
yeah, I much prefer it.
Yeah, but I think train is coming back. I mean, train were known a century ago for long journey because nobody was flying, was far too expensive.
Mm.
And I think it's coming back, luckily. So I think government needs to put those line back over long distance.
Yeah,
And it's in the train you can work. You don't need to wait like in the plane. You need to be 2 hours in advance.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
no,
it's much more comfortable just as a whole. I find it a much more pleasant experience. And as you
absolutely.
said, I can still work and do what I need to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, they're really good tips. Thank you. And I think when we hear news stories and things, renewables seem or can feel like a big picture problem that, governments and companies need to solve. But what can the average household or community do to support that transition?
Yeah, when I hear people saying that any change in their fossil fuel consumption would be insignificant,
Mm,
I like to remind them that we are 8 billion people on the planet, and
mm,
that industrialized countries alone consume the large majority,
mm.
probably close to 80% of the fossil fuel energy. So, in other words, the behavior of all of us together has by far the biggest impact. But you need to be aware that my behavior, your behavior, our behavior can impact, but we are not alone. So I better look at myself as an individual than waiting for a government to make a shift. We can make a difference together.
No, exactly. And I think this is what I was trying to explain in the last episode, that it's not about, suddenly tomorrow cutting everything out, not traveling, not eating any beef, not having the heating on, only driving electric cars. I think it's those small changes. And even if you can only do a couple of those, then that's fine. It's all going towards it. But it's about being aware of our actions and the impacts that it's going to make. And slowly, then it's not going to feel like a big change overnight. So small steps, I think that's the way to go, or certainly how I see it anyway.
Yeah, no, agree, agree.
Yeah. And I think I might know the answer to this question just based on what we've spoken about already. But you've worked the whole energy spectrum. So if you had to predict one renewable technology that's going to be, the thing that's going to reshape the way we think about energy in the next 10 years, what do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I understand why you can guess, because we mentioned it at least 2 times. In my view, there is only one holy grail in this renewable energy to make a huge difference. I'm not talking about technology improvement, a huge improvement, and that is energy storage. To that extent that I'm working for a startup that has technologies to provide to the market. And then when I meet bankers, someday was one banker in Paris, he said, "Oh, you're not in storage, so you're not of interest to me." They only invest in storage. And why? He said, once storage is solved, then the renewable energy technologies will just unfold one after each other. But the storage is the focus today to make a huge difference.
Yeah, so that's where it's growing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Nice. Well, let's wrap up on a fun one then. So if you had to describe the energy transition as a movie genre, what would it be and why?
Yeah, if you allow me, it might be cynical instead of fun, but okay, that's me. That's me talking here. Uh, let's imagine a thriller with two parties, and in this thriller, party one or party A, they are known for their land containing massive oil and gas reservoirs. So they have a lot of oil and gas, and they always want more land. And the party B, they are addicted to oil and gas, but they are developing renewable technologies. So the thriller is about, will party B be able to get rid of their addiction in favor of renewable energy? We need to watch the film to know the answer.
Oh, really? You're leaving us on a cliffhanger. Now I'm intrigued. I want to see the movie.
Yeah, me too. I'm very curious how fast the thriller will be unfold.
Yeah, exactly that. Well, Vincent, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise and helping us just untangle, a few surface things. It's been really lovely to speak to you, and also thank you for believing in my mission and being my first guest in the first place. For listeners that want to connect with you and learn more about you, where's the best place to find you?
The simple way is to connect to my LinkedIn. You type Vincent Dewulf and you will find me. And then from there, we can have any conversation about renewable energy and maybe about films as well.
About films. You're the next director.
Maybe. But it was a pleasure talking to you, Connie, and good luck further in your activities.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Vincent. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to What's the Deal. And if you've enjoyed this chat, please don't keep it a secret. Share it with a friend, leave a review, or send me your energy questions. I want to hear them and get them answered for you. And remember, the choices that we do make today are what power the world of tomorrow. So let's keep learning, asking questions, and charging forward together. Until next time, stay curious, stay plugged in, and I will see you here next week for the next episode of What's the Deal.